Millionaire invites black girl into a trap, but finds himself captivated when she arrives. The story begins when the wealthy man invites a young black girl into what he whimsically refers to as a trap. This isn't a trap in the traditional sense, but rather a setting crafted to test assumptions and provoke thought. The millionaire, having lived in his own bubble of luxury, is intrigued by the potential of their meeting. He is curious about how their worlds will collide and what unexpected insights might arise from this interaction.
Story. Lucas Harrington was a man of wealth, power, and solitude. Known for his sharp mind and ruthless approach in business, he rarely mingled with those he considered below his social rank. For him, life was a series of calculated moves, a game where emotions only got in the way. One evening, however, something unusual caught his attention. Amara, his housemaid, a reserved, graceful woman who had been working quietly in his mansion for years, seemed to walk with a different energy that day. She had always been diligent, keeping her distance and performing her duties with an air of dignity that both intrigued and challenged Lucas's indifferent nature. It was a quiet evening, and Lucas was in his study, reviewing his latest investments, when a thought crossed his mind. Perhaps it was boredom, or maybe a need for distraction, but he decided to do something unusual. What would happen if I invited her to dinner, he wondered, not as a sincere gesture, but more as a test. A strange, hidden curiosity urged him to understand the kind of person who served him every day, invisible and silent. He felt an odd thrill at the thought of observing her in a situation outside her usual role, to see if she would be as composed at his table as she was at his service. That same night, he sent a message to Amara, requesting her presence for dinner the following evening. The message was formal, and Lucas framed it as a discussion about her future. He wondered how she would react, imagining she might feel uneasy, nervous, or even honored. It's just a small experiment, he thought to himself. He didn't expect much from the evening beyond a bit of amusement. After all, he was a man who knew people. He believed he had them all figured out, especially those who lived lives so different from his own. Still, he felt an unusual anticipation, one that he couldn't quite name. Amara received the invitation with a mix of surprise and suspicion. In her years of working for Lucas, he had never spoken to her beyond basic instructions and polite formalities. To suddenly be invited to dine with him felt surreal. She wondered if she had done something wrong or if he was planning to discuss her employment. The message mentioned her future, which stirred both hope and dread in her heart. She knew Lucas as a distant figure, a man of few words who looked at people more as assets than as individuals. Yet, despite the uncertainty, she was determined to face the evening with grace. The following day, Amara spent extra time preparing for the dinner. She wore a simple, elegant dress, one she rarely had an occasion to wear. She felt a mix of nerves and pride as she looked at herself in the mirror. Her life had been one of resilience and quiet strength, and tonight, she was stepping out of her usual role, even if just for an evening. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she was more than her position as a maid. Tonight, she was determined to show him that dignity was not defined by wealth. Lucas was already seated when she entered the dining room. He looked up and for a moment, felt a strange sense of admiration. She walked in with a calm confidence, her posture straight, her eyes clear. She didn't appear intimidated, which both intrigued and unsettled him. He gestured for her to sit, and she took her seat across from him, maintaining an air of quiet composure. The silence between them was thick, and Lucas realized he had underestimated her presence. The dinner, which he had thought would be a trivial event, began to feel strangely significant. As they started to eat, Lucas made small talk, expecting her to respond meekly. But Amara surprised him with her responses, intelligent, thoughtful, and sometimes laced with a quiet humor that caught him off guard. She spoke with a wisdom that came from experience, a perspective far different from his own. Her voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. It was the first time in years that he found himself genuinely listening, interested in what someone else had to say. He began to ask more questions, partly out of curiosity and partly to keep the conversation going. Amara spoke about her life with honesty and humility. She didn't complain or seek sympathy. Instead, she talked about the strength she'd found in adversity, the pride she took in her work, and the dreams she had yet to fulfill. Lucas felt something shift within him. He had expected to see her as she was, a maid, someone serving him. Instead, he found himself faced with a person of depth, resilience, and quiet ambition. For the first time, he wondered what it would be like to see the world through her eyes. As the evening continued, Lucas realized he was no longer playing the game he had intended. The experiment was no longer a test for her, but rather a revelation for him. Amara had shattered his assumptions, breaking down the invisible wall he had so carefully constructed between himself and those he deemed lesser. He found himself captivated, not by her role but by her as a person, someone with a life, thoughts, and dreams as rich and complex as his own. As the meal continued, Lucas found himself surprisingly at ease, a rare feeling for a man used to constant control. Amara had managed to dismantle the stiffness of the room with her calm presence. He watched her more closely now, noting how her eyes sparkled when she spoke of books she had read, dreams she once had, or places she wanted to see. It wasn't the usual meekness he expected. There was a quiet strength in her words, a self-assurance that contrasted sharply with his own rigid outlook on life. He realized he had never truly known her, and for the first time, he felt compelled to learn. Amara noticed his attentiveness, but remained cautious. She was aware of Lucas's reputation and the stories of his cold, businesslike nature. But tonight, he seemed different, almost vulnerable. She wondered if this dinner was a setup, a way to manipulate or test her. Yet, his interest felt genuine. She decided to trust her instincts and continue speaking openly, though she held back her deepest thoughts. She shared parts of her past, her family's sacrifices, the struggles she endured to get by, and the pride she took in her work, despite society often looking down on it. Lucas listened, genuinely moved by her honesty. As she spoke, Lucas felt an unfamiliar feeling, a twinge of guilt. He had never considered the lives of people like Amara, those who worked for him but were invisible to his world. Her stories of resilience and perseverance touched something he hadn't felt in years. He remembered his own early struggles, the long nights and the sacrifices he made to reach his current status. But unlike him, Amara had faced those battles without the privilege of wealth or status to fall back on. He felt humbled, even a bit ashamed, for his initial intent in inviting her. What started as a test now felt like a lesson he needed to learn. By the time dessert was served, the tone had shifted completely. Lucas no longer saw Amara as his maid, but as a person with a rich life experience that contrasted with his own. He asked her about her dreams, genuinely curious. Amara hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much, but she could see that his interest was sincere. She told him of her passion for helping others, her dream of one day running a community center in her neighborhood to support underprivileged families. It was a dream she had kept close, one that seemed out of reach yet burned brightly in her heart. Lucas was taken aback. He hadn't expected such a response, and the realization of her ambition, her selflessness, only deepened his fascination. Here was someone who, despite facing countless challenges, still dreamed of giving back. The notion felt foreign to him, someone who had always prioritized personal success and power. Yet, hearing her speak stirred something inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He found himself wanting to know how he could help her, how he could somehow support her dreams, even if it was merely through encouragement. The evening was slipping by, yet neither seemed in a hurry to end it. For Lucas, this was the first time in years he had engaged in a conversation that felt real, unguarded. He was beginning to see Amara in a new light, and it unsettled him in a way he couldn't fully understand. He wasn't used to being vulnerable or letting his guard down, yet here he was, captivated by someone he'd once considered merely part of the background. It wasn't about her status or appearance, it was something deeper, a connection he hadn't expected. Amara, too, felt a shift within herself. She had come to this dinner unsure, skeptical, and guarded. But Lucas's interest and kindness, though unexpected, felt real. She sensed his curiosity, his questions that probed not out of judgment but out of genuine interest. She saw a man who, beneath the tough exterior, was perhaps as lonely and guarded as she was. The difference was, he had built his walls out of choice, while she had been forced to live with hers. The evening was as much a revelation for her as it was for him. The conversation softened further, moving from dreams and ambitions to simpler things: favorite books, childhood memories, quiet moments of laughter. Lucas felt himself relax, enjoying her presence without pretense. For the first time, he allowed himself to let go of his assumptions, to see Amara as she truly was. He realized he had spent so much time chasing wealth and success that he had forgotten what it meant to connect, to truly see another person. Amara's warmth and resilience were slowly breaking down his defenses. As the evening came to a close, Lucas felt a pang of reluctance. He didn't want the night to end, didn't want to return to the emptiness of his daily life without this newfound sense of connection. Amara, too, felt a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. She had walked into this dinner with apprehension, yet she was leaving with a sense of unexpected respect for her employer. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as a maid but as a person with her own dreams and desires. And as she looked into Lucas's eyes one last time, she sensed he felt the same. As she stood to leave, Lucas found himself saying something that surprised even him. "I'd like to do this again if you'd be willing." He realized how much he meant it, how much he wanted to continue getting to know her. Amara paused, considering his offer. She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I would like that," she replied. And with that she left, leaving Lucas alone in the dining room, lost in thoughts he hadn't expected. The walls he had built around himself felt a little weaker, and for the first time in years, he looked forward to something more than just his next business venture. The next morning, Lucas woke up with an unusual sense of anticipation. The memories of last night lingered, bringing with them a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Amara's words, her laughter, her quiet determination, it all replayed in his mind, unsettling yet fascinating him. He found himself questioning his own life, his choices, and the way he had treated those around him. For so long, he had operated in a world of transactions, where people were either useful or invisible. But now, he couldn't get Amara out of his mind. She had changed something within him. Throughout the day, Lucas tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts drifted constantly back to her. He wondered what she was doing, if she felt the same strange connection that had struck him so deeply. He was surprised by his own eagerness to see her again, to learn more about her world. It was unlike him to be distracted, yet here he was, unable to think of much else. The memory of her quiet grace, her unguarded honesty, filled the corners of his mind, disrupting the strict routines that had once given him comfort. Amara, meanwhile, had returned to her usual duties but couldn't ignore the impact the dinner had on her. She found herself thinking about Lucas, about the man she had seen behind the cool, businesslike demeanor. Beneath his wealth and status, she had glimpsed a person who seemed lost, almost haunted by his own choices. It surprised her to think that he, someone with everything, might still feel empty inside. She didn't know why he had invited her to dinner, but whatever his reasons, she felt that somehow, they had both been changed by it. As the day went on, Lucas grew restless. He considered calling Amara to his study, using some trivial excuse just to talk to her. But he stopped himself, unsure of what he would even say. It was a strange feeling for him, this hesitation, this desire for connection without a clear motive. He had always been a man of purpose, of goals and outcomes. Yet with Amara, there was no agenda, only a quiet, persistent curiosity. He found himself reflecting on his own life, wondering when he had last felt truly alive, truly connected to another human being. Over the next few days, Lucas observed Amara from a distance, noting her interactions with other staff, her gentle nature, her quiet resilience. He admired her even more now, seeing how she carried herself with dignity despite the hard life she had led. It was humbling for him, a man used to exerting power and control, to watch someone who had faced so many challenges still find a way to hold on to her integrity. He wondered how he could have overlooked her for so long, how he could have been blind to the humanity of those around him. One evening, he found himself in the library, browsing through books he hadn't touched in years. His eyes fell on a volume about empathy and human connection, a book he had dismissed in the past as sentimental nonsense. But now, with Amara's influence still fresh in his mind, he opened it and began to read. The words spoke of understanding others, of seeing beyond the surface, of breaking down the barriers that separate people. As he read, he realized how little he had truly understood about human connection. His wealth had isolated him, and in his quest for power, he had lost sight of what really mattered. Meanwhile, Amara tried to make sense of her own feelings. She knew that her connection with Lucas was dangerous, that it blurred the lines between her role and his authority. But she couldn't deny the impact he had made on her. She had seen glimpses of a man who was deeply flawed yet somehow sincere in his attempts to connect. She didn't know where this strange bond would lead, but she couldn't help feeling that their lives were entwined in ways neither of them had expected. She felt both a thrill and a fear, knowing that whatever was happening between them was powerful and uncharted. Lucas found himself eager to speak to Amara again, but he wanted it to be different this time. He didn't want the formality of a dinner invitation or the constraints of their professional relationship. He wanted to speak to her as an equal, to hear her thoughts, her dreams, without the barriers that separated them. The idea of reaching out to her, of bridging the gap between their worlds, excited him in a way he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to understand her world, to see life through her eyes, and perhaps in doing so, rediscover himself. One evening, unable to resist any longer, Lucas found Amara in the garden, a place she often went to for a moment of peace after a long day. He approached her with a quiet determination, his heart pounding in a way he wasn't used to. When she looked up and saw him, she seemed surprised but not uncomfortable. They stood in silence for a moment, the evening air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice softer than usual. "Amara, would you mind if we talked? Just as people." She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but saw only openness. Slowly, she nodded, and they sat together on a nearby bench. The night was calm, with the scent of flowers filling the air. For the first time, they spoke without the formalities of employer and employee, without the constraints of their roles. They talked about life, about dreams and regrets, about the paths they had taken and the ones they had yet to explore. It was a conversation unlike any Lucas had ever had, and as he listened, he felt a strange sense of peace. As they spoke, Lucas realized how much he had missed this kind of connection, this honest, unguarded exchange between two people. He felt vulnerable yet liberated, as though he were finally shedding the weight of his own walls. Amara, too, felt a quiet joy, knowing that he was listening, that he saw her as more than just a maid. For a brief moment, they existed outside the world's expectations, as two souls simply trying to understand each other. In that quiet night, they began to see the possibility of something greater, a friendship, a partnership, or perhaps even a love that defied all conventions. The next morning, Lucas found himself in an uncharacteristically light mood. He went through his meetings and calls with unusual patience, his thoughts occasionally drifting to the night he spent talking with Amara in the garden. For once, his work felt secondary, as if the carefully curated world of business deals and power moves paled in comparison to the connection he had discovered. It unsettled him, this new perspective, yet it also felt like a liberation he hadn't known he needed. For Amara, however, the conversation lingered with mixed emotions. She replayed their words in her mind, feeling a strange pull toward Lucas yet unsure of what it truly meant. She had spent years defining her boundaries, her identity shaped by hard-won independence. But Lucas had started to break down those carefully guarded walls, and she wasn't certain if she could trust him, or even herself, around him. He was still her employer, a man of immense power and privilege, and that divide loomed large in her mind, reminding her of the risks of growing too close. Over the next few days, Lucas tried to find reasons to interact with her. He asked about small unnecessary tasks, lingered in rooms he knew she would pass through, and even made attempts to learn about her culture and background, hoping to understand her better. For someone who was usually detached, he found himself putting in unusual effort to be present around her. Amara noticed his attempts, and though she was wary, she also felt a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She sensed his sincerity, the way he was earnestly trying to reach across the chasm between their worlds. But one afternoon, as they were exchanging a few quiet words in the kitchen, they were interrupted by one of Lucas's longtime business associates, Richard Lawson. Known for his traditional values and old-school views, Richard noticed the interaction and gave Lucas a curious, almost disapproving look. He quickly masked it, but Lucas caught it and felt a stab of anger. He realized, perhaps for the first time, how his peers might view his newfound friendship. He had never cared about others' opinions before, but the subtle disapproval stung because it felt like a judgment of something he had come to value deeply. After Richard left, Lucas felt a strange mix of shame and defiance. He didn't like the way his friend had looked at Amara, as if she were less than him. The incident stirred up emotions he hadn't expected, reminding him of how society might never see past the roles they assign to people. It made him question his own motives, wondering if he was being naive, if his feelings for Amara were nothing more than a fleeting fascination. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. She had changed him, challenged him, in a way no one else had. Amara, however, had noticed the tension as well, and it awakened her own fears. She began to pull back slightly, keeping her conversations with Lucas brief and professional. She couldn't afford to let herself get too close, not when the cost could be so high. She reminded herself of the stories she'd heard from others in her position, of friendships and promises that never held up when tested. Lucas was kind, and he was sincere, but she knew all too well the power imbalance that defined their worlds. She had spent years building a life she could be proud of, and she wasn't ready to risk it. Lucas felt her withdrawal almost immediately. Every interaction felt colder, more guarded, and he found himself missing the warmth and openness they had shared. It frustrated him, not understanding why she had suddenly changed. He knew he had to address it, but he didn't know how to bridge the gap she had placed between them. For the first time, he realized how little he knew about the challenges she faced, about the realities of her life that were invisible to him. His privilege had shielded him from those struggles, and he felt a deepening respect for her resilience, even as he longed to draw her close again. One evening, unable to bear the distance any longer, Lucas found Amara as she was about to leave for the night. He asked if they could speak privately, and though she hesitated, she agreed. They walked back to the garden, where their last conversation had been. Lucas struggled to find the right words, finally asking, "Why are you pulling away?" His voice was softer than usual, tinged with the vulnerability he had so carefully hidden. I thought we were starting to understand each other." Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of warmth and caution. She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. "Lucas," she began, choosing her words carefully, "you and I live in different worlds. I can't afford to forget that." She explained, as gently as she could, that while their connection was real, there were boundaries that society would never fully allow them to cross. Her words were not bitter, but rather a reflection of the reality she had learned to navigate. She reminded him of the prejudices people like Richard represented, the kind of judgments that would never disappear. Lucas listened, his heart heavy with understanding. He had never considered how much more complex this was for her, how her experiences were shaped by forces he had never had to face. He realized that his feelings, while genuine, had overlooked the challenges that came with them. But instead of discouraging him, her words only deepened his resolve. He felt a powerful urge to protect her, to bridge the gap that separated them, no matter how long it took. "Amara," he said quietly, "I know it's not easy, but I'm willing to try. Whatever it takes, I want to make this work." Amara studied his face, seeing a sincerity she hadn't expected. Part of her wanted to believe him, to give in to the warmth she felt when she was around him. But another part knew the risks, the sacrifices she would have to make. In the quiet of the garden, with only the stars as witnesses, she let herself admit the truth she had been holding back. "Lucas," she said softly, "I don't know if we can. But I want to try too. For a moment, they stood in silence, each acknowledging the challenges that lay ahead. Yet in that quiet moment, they felt a shared determination, a willingness to face whatever came their way together. The shadows of the past hadn't disappeared, but they felt lighter now, less insurmountable. And as they looked at each other, they knew that whatever path they took, it would be a journey that would change them both forever. After that night, Lucas and Amara began to navigate a delicate dance, trying to reconcile the bond they felt with the limitations of their worlds. They found small moments to talk, quiet exchanges in the hallways or brief pauses in the kitchen. Their conversations grew deeper, though often tinged with an unspoken tension, both aware of the risks, yet drawn to each other in a way that felt beyond their control. Lucas became more attentive, asking Amara about her day, her interests, her dreams. Each small detail he learned only strengthened his resolve to prove that their connection was real. Amara, though cautious, found herself looking forward to those moments with him. She saw sides of Lucas that she doubted many others knew, a gentle curiosity, a desire to understand her life and her struggles. He listened with an intensity that disarmed her, making her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. Yet her heart was conflicted. She wanted to trust him, but the weight of her reality lingered, reminding her that trust in such circumstances could come with a price. Still, she allowed herself to enjoy their growing closeness, savoring the rare feeling of being truly understood. One evening, Lucas invited her to walk with him around the gardens after her shift. The request was unexpected, and Amara hesitated, aware of the whispers that might follow. But something in his voice, a gentle urgency, convinced her to accept. As they strolled beneath the soft glow of garden lights, Lucas shared stories of his own struggles, of the loneliness that came with his wealth and the isolation that surrounded his success. He spoke of a childhood marked by pressure and expectations, a path he hadn't fully chosen but had followed out of duty. Hearing Lucas's vulnerabilities softened something in Amara. She saw that, in his own way, he too was confined, albeit by a gilded cage of his own making. He had built walls around himself, just as she had, and in that shared understanding, she felt their connection deepen. She began to open up more, sharing memories of her own hardships, the sacrifices her family had made, the way she had learned to find strength in small victories. For a moment, they walked side by side, two people from different worlds yet united by the resilience life had demanded of them. As their conversations continued, Lucas began to consider ways he could help Amara achieve her dreams. He thought about her vision of a community center and realized he had the resources to make it happen. But he was careful not to overstep. He knew how important her independence was to her. One day, he approached the idea gently, suggesting that he could introduce her to people who might support her project. She was touched by his offer, yet wary. Accepting help from him felt complicated, like crossing a boundary she wasn't sure she was ready to breach. Amara's reluctance surprised Lucas. In his world, connections and favors were commonplace, a currency as real as money. But he began to understand that for her, accepting help wasn't just about support. It was about her sense of self and the strength she had built through hard work. She explained to him, gently but firmly, that her dream had always been to build something on her own terms, not as a gift from someone else. Lucas respected her wishes, realizing how much pride and identity she had woven into her dream. But he quietly resolved to support her in any way she would allow. Their relationship grew deeper as Lucas learned to respect her boundaries and Amara began to let her guard down, slowly trusting in the sincerity of his friendship. Yet, they both knew that others would question their connection, judge it harshly. Lucas's family and peers would likely disapprove, and Amara's community might view it with suspicion, seeing it as a threat to her hard-won independence. Despite these obstacles, they found strength in each other, leaning on their shared understanding and unspoken bond to carry them through the challenges. One evening, Lucas hosted a formal event for his business associates, and despite his internal struggle, he found himself wanting Amara to be there, not as a maid but as his guest. It was a bold, potentially controversial choice, but he knew that her presence would mean more to him than any other person in the room. Amara, initially hesitant, finally agreed, feeling the weight of what her attendance would signify. She knew it would stir whispers, that people would look at her with judgment, but something in her wanted to stand by him, to let herself be seen for who she was beyond her role. When Amara arrived at the event, dressed simply yet elegantly, the room fell silent. Lucas felt a surge of pride as he introduced her to his colleagues, who were clearly taken aback. Amara held her head high, meeting the gazes of those who underestimated her with quiet confidence. For the first time, Lucas saw his world through her eyes, the silent judgments, the dismissive glances, the assumptions. He felt a fierce protectiveness rise within him, an anger at the invisible walls that separated people based on status and skin color. Throughout the evening, Lucas stayed by Amara's side, showing his colleagues that she was more than a mere employee to him. She spoke with poise and intelligence, impressing even the most skeptical of his peers. Yet, beneath her calm demeanor, Amara felt the strain of holding her place in a world that had never been meant for her. She felt Lucas's support, but she also sensed the weight of the societal divide that stretched between them. Though the night went smoothly, she was left with an undeniable awareness of the obstacles they would continue to face. As the night ended, Lucas walked her to the garden, the only place that had become a refuge for them both. They sat together in the quiet, letting the weight of the evening settle around them. Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and uncertainty. "Thank you, Lucas," she said softly. "But I need to be sure. I need to know that you understand what this means for both of us." Lucas nodded, reaching for her hand. "I do, Amara. And I'm willing to face whatever comes, as long as you are." In that moment, they made a silent promise, to face the judgments, to overcome the boundaries, and to protect the connection they had found. Their path forward was uncertain, filled with challenges they could only begin to imagine. But they both knew that they were willing to try, to risk their hearts and their comfort for a chance at something real, something that neither had found in their separate worlds. As they sat together under the stars, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, united by a love that was as improbable as it was powerful. The following weeks were filled with a mixture of excitement and tension as Lucas and Amara's relationship grew deeper. They no longer danced around their feelings, but still took care to keep them discreet. For Amara, the quiet moments they shared were precious, but she knew they came at a cost. She saw the way some of the staff looked at her, the subtle changes in their demeanor. Whispers and rumors began to spread, and she worried not only about her own reputation but about the future she'd worked so hard to build. Lucas, too, was aware of the scrutiny from his peers and family. His father, who had long been critical of Lucas's choices, demanded an explanation after hearing rumors of Amara's presence at the event. His father's words were sharp, warning Lucas of the damage such a relationship could cause to his status and image. Lucas felt a rare defiance rise within him, and for the first time, he pushed back against his father's expectations, refusing to apologize for caring about someone he respected deeply. Despite Lucas's loyalty and assurance, Amara began to feel the pressure of her position. She had always taken pride in her independence, her ability to carve out a place for herself in a world that wasn't always welcoming. But now, as her connection to Lucas became harder to hide, she wondered if she was putting herself in a vulnerable position. She feared becoming reliant on someone else's protection, someone whose world she could never truly be a part of. Her pride and survival instincts urged her to distance herself, but her heart ached at the thought. The situation reached a boiling point when Richard Lawson, Lucas's associate who had noticed their closeness weeks before, made a snide comment at a business gathering. Under the guise of friendly conversation, Richard hinted at Lucas's unusual taste in company, his voice dripping with disdain. Lucas's temper flared, and he defended Amara openly, leaving no doubt that she was important to him. But as satisfying as it was to stand up for her, Lucas felt the weight of the consequences. He was beginning to see how much his own life had insulated him from the prejudices Amara faced daily. The encounter with Richard left Lucas questioning the people around him, wondering how many of them harbored similar judgments. His world, which once felt secure and rewarding, began to feel increasingly shallow. He saw with new clarity the isolation his wealth had created, how it had kept him from truly understanding the experiences of those outside his sphere. With every passing day, His resolve to protect Amara only grew stronger, yet he knew he couldn't shield her from everything. Amara, meanwhile, felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. Lucas's defense had stirred something deep within her, a hope she had long suppressed. But she knew that every step they took toward each other risked widening the divide between them and the world they inhabited. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of her own life, that her dreams were becoming entangled with Lucas's, in ways that might be impossible to untangle. She feared that if their relationship ended, she would be left with nothing but shattered ambitions and memories. One evening, Amara confronted Lucas with her fears. She told him about her dreams, about the community center she wanted to build, about the independence that had always been her guiding star. "Lucas, I don't want to lose myself in this," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't want to wake up one day and realize I've sacrificed everything I worked for." Her words struck him deeply. For the first time, he realized that his love for her couldn't be just about bringing her into his world. It had to respect her own aspirations, her need for autonomy. Lucas promised to support her dream, not as a benefactor but as a partner, encouraging her every step of the way. He offered to connect her with resources, with people who could help her achieve her goals on her terms. He made it clear that he didn't want to take ownership of her vision, only to be there as she pursued it. This reassured Amara, though she knew it would still be a complicated journey. She was beginning to believe that their love didn't have to be a threat to her independence, but rather something that could strengthen her. With renewed determination, Amara began to work toward her community center dream, meeting with potential supporters and carefully planning each step. Lucas, true to his word, provided advice and connections without overstepping, respecting her boundaries while quietly supporting her progress. Their relationship grew in strength as they found a way to honor each other's lives and aspirations. They discovered a partnership that was not about ownership but mutual respect, a bond rooted in genuine admiration for each other's resilience and courage. Yet, despite their efforts, they continued to face challenges. Lucas's father remained a source of tension, openly disapproving of Amara and questioning Lucas's commitment to his family's legacy. At the same time, Amara's friends and colleagues expressed their concerns, worried that her relationship with Lucas would ultimately lead to heartbreak. The doubts and pressures from both sides created an invisible weight that hung over them, testing their resolve. It would have been easy for them to walk away, to return to the lives they had known before, but neither was willing to give up what they had found together. One night, exhausted from the demands of both her work and her new venture, Amara found herself questioning whether they could truly sustain a relationship under such pressure. She shared her doubts with Lucas, wondering aloud if it was worth the struggle. Lucas listened, his own heart heavy, yet his response was unwavering. "Amara," he said, taking her hand, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that what we have is worth fighting for." His words brought her comfort, reminding her of the strength they had found in each other. As they sat together, surrounded by the quiet of the night, they realized that their love was no longer just a fleeting connection. It was a choice, a commitment to navigate the challenges together, no matter how difficult. They knew that the journey ahead would be far from easy, filled with sacrifices and moments of doubt. But they were willing to face it, hand in hand, determined to build a life that honored both their worlds. In that moment, Lucas and Amara made an unspoken promise to one another. They would fight for their love, not just as an escape from their separate lives, but as a path toward something new, a bridge that could unite their worlds, if only they were strong enough to keep crossing it. As Amara's community center plans took shape, the pressure on her relationship with Lucas intensified. Amara poured herself into her work, balancing her job with him and her dream project. Each day was a careful act of endurance, as she tried to balance her responsibilities with the growing tension from those around her. She faced questions from friends and family, who expressed concerns about her connection to Lucas, urging her to remember who she was and not lose herself in his world. Though they meant well, their words often left her feeling isolated, as if her choices no longer truly belonged to her. Lucas, meanwhile, continued to face opposition from his father, who believed his relationship with Amara was a reckless distraction. Lucas's family was steeped in tradition, and his father saw their relationship as a threat to the family's reputation. He pressured Lucas to end things with Amara, reminding him that his obligations lay with the family's legacy, not with a life built alongside someone they would never fully accept. For the first time, Lucas realized just how conditional his family's love and approval had always been, and he wrestled with feelings of betrayal and defiance. One evening, Lucas's father summoned him to the family estate for a private conversation. Lucas arrived, steeling himself, knowing his father would try to manipulate him into abandoning Amara. His father argued that Lucas was throwing away his future for a woman he could never truly be with, pointing out the complications, the differences in status, and the social ramifications. "You may care for her now," his father said coldly, "but love isn't enough when the world stands against you. Think of what you stand to lose." Lucas, filled with anger, realized just how little his father understood him. He replied, "I would rather lose everything than live without integrity. What I have with Amara isn't a mistake. It's real, and I'm not going to let you dictate my life." His father's silence spoke volumes, a severing of ties that had always been brittle. Lucas left, feeling a mixture of relief and grief, knowing that he had chosen his own path, one that his family might never support. Amara noticed the change in Lucas when he returned that night. His usually confident demeanor was softened, tinged with the sadness of someone who had walked away from his own blood. She reached out to comfort him, sensing that he had paid a high price for standing by her. Lucas told her about the confrontation, and though she admired his bravery, she felt a pang of guilt. She worried that his love for her was costing him more than he would ever admit, that he was sacrificing his entire world to be with her. "I don't want you to regret this," she whispered. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your family." But Lucas reassured her, telling her that, for the first time, he felt he was making a decision that truly reflected who he wanted to be. He expressed that, though his family's support would have been a blessing, he had found something far more meaningful in his connection with her. Amara felt a mixture of gratitude and fear. She had always dreamed of a life built on her terms, and now Lucas was doing the same, defying expectations to be with her. She knew the stakes were high, but his conviction strengthened her own. As the days passed, their relationship deepened, but so did the scrutiny. One evening, Amara's community center project faced backlash when rumors spread about her connection to Lucas. Some potential supporters withdrew, questioning her motives, while others judged her for associating with someone of such wealth and privilege. The assumptions were painful, as people who once encouraged her now doubted her intentions. For Amara, it was a harsh reminder of how the world often judged by appearances, not by the content of a person's heart. Lucas was furious when he found out, offering to help counter the backlash. But Amara, though grateful, refused, wanting to fight this battle on her own terms. She didn't want to be seen as dependent on him or anyone else. Her dream was something she needed to build with her own hands. Despite her exhaustion, she pushed forward, determined to prove that her project was legitimate, that it was rooted in her passion and vision. Her determination inspired Lucas, though he also worried about the toll it was taking on her. Then came an unexpected setback. An investor Amara had counted on withdrew funding, influenced by the rumors and social pressure. The community center's future seemed uncertain, and Amara felt the weight of all her sacrifices come crashing down. Frustrated and heartbroken, she found herself questioning whether it had all been worth it. She felt betrayed, abandoned by people who once stood by her, and even began to wonder if her relationship with Lucas had been a mistake. Lucas, sensing her despair, tried to comfort her, but she was distant, her heart burdened by the feeling of failure. One evening, in a moment of raw honesty, Amara expressed her fears, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting," she admitted. "Maybe we were foolish to think we could overcome all of this." Her words cut deep, but Lucas knew she was speaking from a place of pain, not truly doubting their love. He reached for her hand, a quiet promise in his touch. "You are stronger than you know, Amara. And I believe in you. I believe in us." They sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, aware that they had reached a breaking point. Yet neither wanted to let go, not after all they had been through. Amara felt the weight of their journey, of the sacrifices they both had made, and realized that giving up now would mean abandoning the one thing that had brought her more joy than she had ever known. She looked at Lucas, her resolve slowly returning. "I won't give up. Not on my dream, and not on us." With renewed determination, Amara decided to fight for her project, reaching out to community members, sharing her vision directly with those who could see its true purpose. She organized meetings, fundraisers, and slowly began to regain support. Lucas, proud of her resilience, offered encouragement, but respected her wish to handle things independently. Their love, tested by hardship, grew stronger as they learned to lean on each other without losing themselves. By the end of that difficult period, Amara had secured enough support to keep her project alive. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, a reminder of the strength that had carried her through life's challenges. And in Lucas, she saw not just a partner but a man who had proven his loyalty and love, despite all that he had risked. They had emerged from the trials together, bruised but unbroken, and stronger than ever. In the quiet aftermath, as they stood together in the garden, they realized that they had built something truly unique, a love that had endured judgment, sacrifice, and hardship. And in that love, they found the courage to continue forward, knowing that, whatever obstacles lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Months later, Amara's vision for the community center was finally coming to life. The building, once a forgotten structure in a neglected part of town, was now filled with life, color, and hope. She had poured every ounce of her energy into this project, fighting for funding, rallying volunteers, and coordinating programs that would benefit countless families. Walking through the newly renovated halls, Amara felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had created a space where children could learn, where adults could gain new skills, and where people could find a community to call their own. On the opening day, Amara stood at the entrance, greeting every person who walked through the doors. Lucas was there beside her, offering quiet support and admiration. She felt his hand on her shoulder, a steady presence that reminded her of the journey they had traveled together. "You did this, Amara," he whispered, "and nothing can take that away from you." His words brought a tear to her eye, and she realized just how much his love had meant to her along the way, how it had strengthened her in ways she hadn't anticipated. As people gathered for the opening ceremony, Amara gave a heartfelt speech, sharing the story of her journey, the obstacles she had overcome, and her hope for the future of the center. She thanked the community for believing in her vision and for standing by her, especially when times had been difficult. She ended with a tribute to Lucas, who had shown her a kind of love that transcended differences, that had withstood the weight of judgment and adversity. Her gratitude was palpable, and the crowd responded with applause, moved by the honesty and strength in her words. The event was filled with joy and celebration. Children explored the learning rooms, parents signed up for workshops, and people from all backgrounds mingled, united by the shared hope of a better future. Lucas watched Amara from a distance, marveling at the way she connected with everyone around her. He knew that her spirit, her resilience, was something he would never tire of witnessing. She had brought life to something that had once been merely a dream, and he couldn't have been prouder of her accomplishments. As the sun set, Amara and Lucas slipped away from the crowd, retreating to a quiet corner of the garden that had become their sanctuary. They walked hand in hand, savoring the peace of the moment. Amara felt an indescribable contentment, a fulfillment that went beyond her success. She looked at Lucas, her heart full of gratitude and love. "Thank you for standing by me, for believing in me even when I doubted myself," she said softly. Lucas smiled, his gaze filled with warmth. "Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like." They talked about the future, about their dreams beyond the center, and the life they wanted to build together. They knew that there would still be challenges, that the prejudices and pressures from their respective worlds hadn't disappeared. But they had found something worth fighting for, a love that had proven itself, time and again, to be unbreakable. In each other, they had found a partner who inspired them, who encouraged them to grow and to reach for something greater. Over the following weeks, Amara and Lucas continued to deepen their relationship, blending their worlds carefully, mindful of the boundaries they still needed to respect. Amara continued her work at the community center, and Lucas began to get involved as a volunteer, teaching business skills to young adults. Their shared passion for giving back brought them closer, allowing them to connect in a way that was both fulfilling and grounded in mutual respect. Their love, rooted in admiration and shared purpose, became a source of strength for them both. One evening, Lucas surprised Amara with a ring, a simple, elegant piece that symbolized his commitment to her. He didn't propose with a grand gesture or dramatic words. Instead, he looked into her eyes and spoke from his heart. "Amara, I don't know what challenges we'll face in the future, but I do know that I want to face them with you. You've taught me that love isn't about possessions or appearances, it's about courage and integrity. I want to build a life with you, one that honors both of our dreams." Amara's heart swelled with emotion as she accepted the ring, knowing that it represented not just a promise but the journey they had already shared. They embraced under the moonlight, each feeling a sense of peace and purpose. Together, they had faced judgment, loss, and hardship, yet their love had endured. They knew that their bond, forged through trials, would guide them through whatever lay ahead, a testament to the resilience of two people who had dared to love against the odds. As time went on, Amara's community center grew into a beacon of hope and opportunity, drawing support from people across the city. It became a place where lives were transformed, where new beginnings were made possible. Lucas continued to support her work, finding fulfillment in the community they had created together. Their relationship, once seen as improbable, became a symbol of what was possible when people looked beyond differences and embraced each other's humanity. In the years that followed, Amara and Lucas built a life filled with love, purpose, and a deep sense of partnership. They faced challenges, yes, but they also experienced the profound joy that came from knowing they had defied the limitations of their separate worlds. Their story became one that others looked to for inspiration, a reminder that true love, when rooted in respect and resilience, could overcome even the greatest of obstacles. And as they stood together, watching over the community they had helped to create, Amara knew that she had found everything she had ever wanted, not in the material wealth of Lucas's world, but in the unwavering support, trust, and love they had discovered in each other. Together, they had proven that dreams were worth pursuing and that, in the end, love could be the bridge that united them all.